Welcome back, everybody, for episode 3 of my Will It Run series on the barn rescued snapper chipper shredder. On episode 1, we figured out that the engine had a fuel problem, and we're going to try to do a quick cleaning on the carburetor, hoping that would solve the issue. On episode 2, we figured out that, well, the carburetor needed a complete rebuild or replacement, and we opted to replace it. We ran a new fuel line, installed a fuel filter, new gas cap, new spark plug, and an aftermarket carburetor. But the engine still wouldn't start on its own. So we gave it a shot of carb cleaner, and then it ran just fine, except for one thing. It was leaking air where the intake manifold bolts to the engine block. When we left off last, we were going to pull the intake manifold and see if replacing that gasket solves the problem. So come along and let's see if that's all it's going to take. Okay. Got the fuel shut off. So I'm going to have to take the carburetor back off, and I'm going to have to take that air intake off. It should be the same size gasket as this one, but the old gasket isn't, it'll work, but it's not the greatest. See if I can get it to work. Maybe I could put this new gasket up in the top of the air intake and use the old one below. Actually, I may have a couple gaskets that'll work from some Gravely stuff. It's possible that I've already got a gasket that'll work for this. Oh, okay. It's not the gasket, it's the air intake's broken. Well, that's not good. Yep, the air intake snapped. That's the problem. Okay, well, let's see if I can order one of those online. I'm not a big fan of trying to fix these because they never really line up flush. But yeah, you can see that yeah, we're not looking at a gasket issue. We're definitely looking at a broken air intake. So we'll have to see what I can do about finding a new one of those. All right, I'll be back when we figure it out. Hello, everybody. It's several days later, and we're downstairs in my basement shop because my replacement intake manifold arrived in the mail. Actually, I think the parts diagrams call it an intake tube, but whatever. It's a little piece that goes between the carburetor and the engine. These, as a new item, are no longer available. So if you need one, you have to scrounge up one that's used, and I found one at a reasonable price, so I snatched it up. Now, while I was waiting for that to show up, I did try my best to repair the old one. You know, I JB welded the ear back on, and I knew it wasn't going to work, but I had nothing to lose but a little bit of time. And you can see as soon as I started to torque down the mounting screw, it just snapped right off. So obviously, we're not going to be able to fix the old one. We're going to have to put this one in. But before I can do that, I want to make a new gasket for this. There is a gasket on the engine. It's about as hard as a rock. So I think it's time we put a new one on that's got a little bit of give, and so hopefully we can tighten this thing down without risking damaging it. In order to make a new gasket, we're going to use some of this generic high-temp gasket material. You could buy this at any auto parts store, supply house, anything like that. I got a couple of razor knives. I'm not sure if I'm going to use them both. We'll have to see. I got a little Sharpie marker and a little hollow punch that I'm going to use to punch the bolt holes out. You really don't need a hollow punch. You could use a drill bit or something like that, but punch is a little cleaner. And of course, since I'm using a punch, I'll need a small hammer to hit the punch with. So that's everything we need. Let's get started. We started by cutting out a small piece of this gasket material and just working it to get it to lay nice and flat. Then we're going to take our old gasket and our Sharpie, and we're just literally going to trace an outline on here. Now this end is broken off, so what I'm going to do is trace the start of the outline. And I'm going to flip the gasket over and trace out this end that's broken off. And we're going to trace the middle. And we're going to mark out our bolt holes. Nothing terribly difficult about that. Now we're just going to take and cut this off. You can use a razor knife. You could use a pair of good scissors for the outside, whatever's more convenient for you. Now the outside on this one doesn't have to be perfect. There could be a little bit of overlap. We have enough room on that engine to allow it. So if I cut it just a hair bit bigger than the original, it's not the end of the world. Just clean this up. And there, we've got the outside cut. The inside's going to be a little more difficult. I think for that, I'm going to try to use this little razor knife here. The only problem with these knives, they cut great, but you can't really apply much pressure because the blades are super thin. And the last thing you want to do is run one of these things into your hand. I've done it. It's not fun. I do not recommend it. So we're just going to go around a few times, if that's what it takes to get this hole cut out. Let's see how we're doing. We're still not through the backside. So let's keep going. Another tool you could use for these inside cuts, and I thought about doing it, but I thought it just seemed a little too equipment involved for an easy how-to video. I like to be as simple as I can with these. But another tool you could use is a scroll saw. Just cut a hole, or punch a hole in the middle of it. Insert your saw blade through it, hook it up to the saw, and then go around and cut it that way. So there we go. We got the inside hole cut. Last thing to do is punch those two bolt holes out. For that, we're going to use our center punch. And we're also going to just put a piece of wood underneath so I don't mess up my workbench any more than I already have. Put our punch over the hole. Punch that one out. Not quite. Give her a tap from the other side. Almost. Now we got the hole on the other side. Let's take a look quick. See if that's going to fit. And that looks pretty good. So let's go ahead, go back out in the garage, get this thing installed. As you can see, got the new gasket and air intake installed, new carburetors on, all the linkage is hooked up just fine, fuel lines hooked up. This should be ready to go. I did leave the air filter off just in case we have a problem, but I'm hoping this thing just starts up under its own power. But let's see what happens. Well, it looks like we're in business. It started up on its own. It restarted on its own. No carb cleaner required, which is what should happen if it's running right. Need to mess with the high speed a little bit more. I think the carb's just going to need to be fine-tuned, but that's to be expected. So let's go ahead and put the air cleaner assembly on. This is kind of a weird sort of setup they've got on these engines. You have to pull the bolt off the bottom of the carburetor, one of the bolts off the top. This little thing slides in. Breather tube hooks up there. And we reinstall the top bolt. And this goes up through there. And your bottom bolt goes through the top of the governor plate, which I did confirm it was supposed to be there, and it wasn't when I got it, so somebody had been into this and messing with it at some point. Now we're going to install our fresh, clean new air filter. Not 100% certain about this pre-filter. I'm not sure we're going to... Yeah, we'll get enough airflow in there, I think. I don't remember if I mentioned this in one of the previous episodes. I think it would have been the last episode when I found out that intake was broke. But there is this big dent in the side of the air cleaner housing. And I am guessing that whatever impact this thing took, if it tipped over, it probably tipped over on this end and fell, that whenever this dent happened is probably when that intake broke. All right, everything's installed. Let's go outside. I got some pruning I got to do on some trees. We take a branch down and let's see what this thing can do. Well, it looks like finally everything's working out well with this little chipper shredder. So this is going to conclude our series, and thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you on another episode.